Welcome to IT Newbies, the podcast where we dive into the world of technology with experts from all walks of life. I'm Brent Ingram, and in each episode, we'll be talking to IT professionals about their career journeys, from their early days as newbies to the heights of success they've achieved. And don't worry if you're new to IT, because we'll also be breaking down complex tech topics into beginner-friendly discussions. So whether you're just starting out in the field or looking to level up your skills, join us on IT Newbies as we explore the exciting world of technology together. Subscribe now and never miss an episode. All right, welcome to IT Newbies. Today on our show, we have Nate Rosales. Nate, how are you doing?
Doing good, man. Thanks for having me.
Oh, yeah, thanks for joining the show. I really appreciate you taking the time out of your day to join.
I'm excited, man. I really enjoy what you're doing here.
Thanks, man. All right, so Nate, what's your current position in IT and what does it kind of basically entail?
I am a senior network engineer for Wells Fargo. I focus primarily on our monitoring tools, which is basically the software suites that keep watch over the 90 to 100,000 different network devices across the enterprise, which would be all of Wells Fargo. I'm not really customer facing in the sense that I don't really deal with folks who have issues at the ground level. I more so support the engineers that go out on the field and install, repair, swap out equipment, and I make sure that our tools are monitoring them, that the alerts are set the way they're supposed to be, so if something goes wrong, the right people are notified. And I also provide support for some of the developers who work on the back end of those tools, because there's separations of duty, basically meaning that not everybody has the keys to the kingdom. Some folks have keys to certain rooms. And so for the sake of security, sometimes some of the folks who work on the tools will need help on the production side, the side that all of our customers use. And so I support them in those ways. And so very vague. I can get a little bit more into the weeds if you want, but at a high level, that's what I'd say that we do.
Okay, so it's basically you're on the networking team and not customer facing. It's more so the techs that go out into the field and are swapping out, different hardware devices, but you're, helping with monitoring what devices are actually up, what seems to be malfunctioning and needs an engineer to, go check it out, and just to help make banks stay online, which is kind of important, right?
Oh, yeah.
So whenever you're dealing with people's money, it's very important to make sure everything works.
Yeah,
Awesome.
people tend to care about their money. Surprisingly, I found that out coming into this industry.
Yeah, it's very surprising. All right, so let's kind of go back to the beginning. How did you first get into IT?
Yeah, well, I was in the military. I was in the Army. I had no interest in computers growing up. I was not tech savvy at all. I mean, apart from being a 90s, early 2000s kid who just logged into AOL after school, jumped on Instant Messenger, chatted with friends, played games that came in the cereal boxes, the CD, the discs that would come in. Sims, Roller Coaster Tycoon, stuff like that. But as far as, taking a PC apart, putting it back together, I was not that kid. I respected a computer. I saw it as a tool, but I was not the kind of kid who took it apart, put it back together, and wanted to know the ins and outs of it. But when I enlisted, my dad basically said to me, it's fun. It's cool to be able to do all of the cool stuff in the Army. He was a tanker. He knew all about it, right? He would go in the field and fire, big missiles from big armored vehicles. And I was like, that sounds great. Like, I want to do that. He said, I would love for you to be able to do that. It'd be fun, to be able to have that shared experience with you. But the reality is, son, is that stuff doesn't really translate to the civilian world.
Mm.
unless you want to be, a SWAT officer. And I was like, well, that would be cool too, but I just don't think that that's in the cards for me. He said, but
Mm.
what's really on the up and up right now is networking, routing, and switching. I was like, I have no idea what that is. He said, well, basically the devices that connect your computer, our computer, to the rest of the world, they're far more advanced. They're growing
Mhm.
in popularity. Cisco was the prime name. It was like that was the only
Yeah.
name at the time, right?
Mhm.
And so he said the Army is adapting and adopting a lot of Cisco technology. So if you were to get a job that allowed you to work with that equipment, it would make you very marketable when you get out. And so he's telling me this. I'm 17 and a half years old. He's telling me this. And I'm
Yeah.
like, okay, whatever. Like just sign the dotted line so that I can enlist. And
Right.
so that's what I did. But actually, when I enlisted, the what he said was true. The
Mhm.
Army was adopting it, but it hadn't adopted it full scale yet. So I came in
Mm.
working on a ton of legacy stuff,
Yeah.
a lot of analog equipment. My units had not transitioned to the digital world, if you will.
Mhm.
But in let me see here. That was 2007, 2008, 2009, 2010. It's when the Army fully adopted the Cisco equipment to basically run their networks. And so
Mm.
we throughout the old, embraced the new. And I would say it was about 3 years into my career that I actually was exposed to modern networking equipment. So it
Yeah.
started off very basic, switching, didn't really get into routing quite yet, basic firewall commands. But as the landscape became more sophisticated and as I grew in rank and responsibility, I was exposed to more and more of the networking side and some of the system administration side. Like I had to have a basic comprehension
Mhm.
of Windows and Mac and Linux and stuff like that in order to integrate some of these devices. But I would say I was first introduced to it in 2007, but I didn't
Mhm.
really start experiencing or getting hands-on experience until 2010. And then in 2013, I deployed to Afghanistan, and I went
Mhm.
from being, the youngest guy on the chopping block to now being the network operations manager for my entire base.
Wow.
And that was a crash course for me because I didn't have time to learn. It's like I came in and
Yeah.
they were like, okay, you're the guy. You need to have this mastered yesterday. And
Oof.
so it was really my back against the wall that forced me to learn what it meant to be a network technician, network engineer to
Mm.
support an enterprise.
Wow. That's amazing. And that's a very unique experience, for getting into networking and IT. And sometimes that's the best way to learn stuff is when you are kind of forced to.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, that's not necessarily anyone's preference, but but
Yeah.
you really do, learn what works and what doesn't work really quickly, especially with networking.
Yeah. And especially back then, man, because
Mhm.
the educational resources were sparse. It was a new frontier. We were
Yeah.
trailblazing. And so there wasn't hindsight at the time, right?
Yeah.
There were people who had a familiarity with networking, and they had all of the advanced certifications and stuff like that, but they were still
Mhm.
in the field, right? They hadn't retired
Yeah.
yet. They weren't teaching like a lot of them are now.
Yeah.
Back in the day, which was I guess just 10 years ago, you know, you didn't have as many teachers and educational resources as you do now.
Yes. That's so true. 'Cause, I mean, what, 2013, YouTube had only really been a thing for maybe 5, 6 years or so, by then. And that's just as like a free, resource. But yeah, a lot of the big training, website companies were just starting to come online
Yeah.
around that time. So there was a lot of physical book work
Hmm.
that you had to, go through. But yeah, that's amazing that you were able to, pick it up and implement it and, succeed during that time. So lots
Yeah.
of kudos to you, man. That's
Well,
amazing.
fortunately for me, I had a lot of really smart people around me,
Hmm.
and they were patient and they understood that if I didn't get it, then the whole mission suffered. So
Yeah.
they had to help.
Yeah.
So there was no hoarding of knowledge. There would be frustrating moments for sure. They'd be like, hey, you got to know this stuff, and I
Yeah.
can't always come and bail you out. And it did start out that way, where I had to
Mm,
reach out a lot, but fortunately, it's very. I mean, it's kind of like if you ask a Linux guy, at what point, does Linux make sense?
yeah.
And it's just they say you spend enough time doing it, and then one day it just clicks, and then from
Yeah.
there you're able to, once you know what it can do, it's from there. It's just experimenting. It's like, oh, can you do this if I type in this
Mm,
command? Because a lot of it's command line, and so it's
yeah.
really just mastering command line and just spending enough time behind a keyboard and just playing with it in a development environment, in a test environment,
Yes. Hmm.
and just really developing that interest and intrigue, just saying like, oh, this can do this, well, can it do that as well, right?
Ah, that's so good. Has I guess the way that you were taught and the way that they were, patient and took time, has that, affected how you help other people learn things?
Yeah, I think what it made me a little bit more sensitive to were the people who, like me, just kind of came into it because they were looking for a good job outside of the
Hmm.
military. And, there were guys who got into the role because, they love computers, they love networking, they love
Hmm.
all of that, right? But by and large, that's not the case in
Yeah.
at least not in my experience. A lot of us, when we get in, we're young, we don't know up from down, and we just wanted to find something that, like I said, would translate well outside of the military. And so I think what it kind of did was it just created within me, I guess, an empathy
Yeah.
toward those who just didn't really have that passion.
Mm,
And it was kind of like if I could do this, you can do this sort of mentality.
yeah.
And, you know, if anything, it taught me it taught me to be patient with them too, because I knew that there were people who were patient with me. And, you know, it yeah, I mean, to answer your question succinctly, yes, it did help. It did contribute to the way that I teach other people to basically enter, who are just entering into this field.
Yeah.
It just gave me more patience for them.
Yeah. So I guess in your opinion, do you think that, if there was a person going into the army looking for a job that could transition into a civilian role afterwards, I guess you have an opinion either way, whether they are passionate about the subject or not? And do you think that matters, like, I guess long term?
No, because the thing about the military is that if they you get good at your job, and I
Yeah.
think for me that's what created the knack, I suppose, for networking, was that
Mm.
I experienced the joy of being good at what I did. And
Yeah.
so while I wasn't necessarily passionate about it outside of work, like I didn't have, like
Mhm.
right now I don't have a test lab in my house or anything like that.
Yeah.
Having like I said, the joy of getting proficient in it
Mhm.
created a passion for me to do well on the job.
Yeah.
And it really made me desire to continue outside of the military within the industry,
Mhm.
because it was something that, like I said, it made me feel good to know that I could do it, that I could do it well. And so for
Yeah.
anybody who's coming in, even if they say, well, I don't have a passion for it, I would say, well, explore it, right?
Hmm.
If it is in fact something that you genuinely are at the very least, you have to be interested in it, right? If I wasn't interested in what my dad was telling me, I wouldn't have pursued it. I would have gone my own way.
Hmm.
But the fact that, like I said, you become proficient at it and you see your contribution to the mission,
Hmm.
uh, advance the mission, right? Your contribution advance the mission. Like I said, there's a satisfaction that comes from that, which then I think stirs more zeal and motivation to continue to do a good job and learn more and develop those skills even further.
That's awesome. I really love that. Can you tell me about a time where you made a error or a big mistake,
Yeah.
and what did you learn from it?
Yeah. What was it? Very, very early on, I remember somebody told me, if you've never brought down a whole network, then you're not a network engineer.
Yeah.
and that was encouraging and also a relief because so between switches, right? Your switches are typically the first physical layer that your computers and your hardware in your offices connect to, right? And
Mhm.
it connects them back to the routers, etc. But between switches, so sometimes you'll have a switch connected to a switch connected to a switch that connects back to a router that connects to the rest of the world, right? Between the switches, there's a connection called a trunk port, and the local area network, or the virtual local area network that allows your IP addresses to communicate to the rest of the world, travels over those trunks, and those trunks have to allow that virtual LAN, local area network, or VLAN for short, to travel through. And if your VLAN is not identified, then your data will not be able to pass through.
Mhm.
Well, there's a specific command, or at least there was back in the day, where if you wanted to add a VLAN to that trunk, you had to type in a very specific command.
Mhm.
So, and you had to actually specify, add this VLAN number to the existing ones. Well, if you don't type in that word add, what it does is that it erases every other VLAN and it only allows yours. And so, and so basically what happened, this happened to me, and this happened to me when I was young in my career. And then this happened to one of my soldiers later on,
Yeah.
when we were in Afghanistan. Fortunately for me, it didn't happen in Afghanistan. It happened while we were in Afghanistan, but one of my soldiers did it. And so we're at a training exercise, and my entire division is there. And a division, I don't know how familiar you are with these terms. A division is several thousand soldiers, right?
Oh
You have the
wow.
company
Okay.
level, which is the lowest, which could be up to 100, 150. Well, the
Mhm.
division is comprised of dozens of companies, and you have several thousand soldiers. So I'm working at the division level, and I type in the wrong command, and the next thing I know, our monitoring tool, I just see red, 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 red all over the place, and I'm like, what is going on? What just happened? And fortunately, we found out. I think we had a civilian contractor on site, and he just very quickly asked, "What happened? Who made changes? Did anybody make any changes?" And we ran through the OSI layer, the OSI
Mhm.
model. So we checked the physical layer, everything was straight, and then the network and data layer. That's when he was like, did anybody make any changes on the switches?" And I rose my hand. I was like, "Well, yeah, I added this VLAN." He's like, "Did you type it this way?" And I was like, "Oh no." And so we went in there, we typed it, we put in the correct command, and then everything
Yeah.
went green again. But funny
Whew.
story, that same exact thing happened in Afghanistan,
Yeah.
and one of my soldiers did it, and we I wasn't as quick to think about that as the civilian contractor was, and so we spent a long time trying to resolve the issue. And the smartest guy on my team figured it out. And he was like, well, what happened? What's going on? And then, this guy who made the change, he was a young kid. He couldn't have been more than
Yeah.
19 years old, right?
Mm-hmm.
And he, in very well intended, he wanted to, just basically just clean up everything and make everything, succinct. And, he was, for continuity's sake, wanted to make sure all the trunks were labeled and all that stuff. Well, he noticed on one of the trunks that a VLAN was missing. And so instead of typing the correct command, he typed in the command that would only allow that one VLAN to pass through. So anyway, when we found out, the older soldier was, frustrated, but and he's kind of like chastising this guy verbally, and he's yelling at him. And, I'm the manager at the time, so I'm kind of watching it. I'm just making sure that he doesn't go too far. Right.
Yeah.
Because this is an opportunity for him to lead and for this kid to learn. So I'm like, all right, I'm just going to make sure that you don't go too far. And he's like, well, why explain yourself? And he's like, well, I just thought it was something that I could do. And he said, yeah, well, you were too preoccupied with wondering whether you could do it. You didn't stop to think about whether you should do it, which was, that classic quote from Jurassic Park.
Yeah.
And I just lost it. I thought it was so funny. But yeah, that, to answer your question, that was probably the biggest thing, just bringing a whole network down. And then seeing it happen to another guy years later, it's just like, okay, this is a universal experience for network engineers.
And whoever designed that command,
oh my gosh, wow, gosh, I would
should
say
be a little bit harder.
He's probably a gazillionaire.
Yeah. What's one lesson that you've learned in this job that you think everyone should learn at some point in their life?
I would say attention to detail is crucial. Like I said, nowadays, I mean, a lot of things are software based, and there's, there are tools out there that are designed to check for changes and errors, and a lot of it's very heavily like automated. Back when I first started, that wasn't the case.
Yeah.
You had to look through lines and lines and lines of command line, and it's very easy to miss important details. But it's not because those details were overly sophisticated or advanced. It was, I think, complacency because of overfamiliarity that you will forego the fundamentals. And so attention to detail in the fundamental things can go a long way. No matter how many certifications you have, how many years of experience you have, we need to be like, I'll use a sports metaphor here, we need to be like Tim Duncan when it comes to our areas of oversight. We need to be, Mr. Fundamentals. Just go to the lowest layer, lowest level, back to the earliest days. And that will be, I think, one of your biggest assets to solving issues.
Oh man, that's really good. And that really does go a long way with, I mean, using Tim Duncan and, basketball as a metaphor. I was thinking of, was it the UCLA coach John Woodman, I believe? He's the guy who, he was a coach for Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, back when, he was in college. And I think the very first practice of the season, every year, he would teach his players how to put on socks properly.
Yeah.
I don't know if you're familiar with the story, but yeah, he'd teach them how to put on socks and how to put on the sneakers correctly so that, they wouldn't get, crazy blisters, because once that happens, everything else kind of, falls by the wayside. It affects everything else that you do. And even, just having the fundamentals down of practicing layups, like fans and people don't get crazy upset if you miss a three, but if you miss a simple layup, it's like, come on, like, this is your job. You should be able to do at least the very basics. But
Yeah.
it's easy to fall into complacency if you're, familiar with it, too familiar with it. And
Yeah.
yeah, that's such
I,
a great advice.
yeah. I do have to say, just for the sake of our listeners and not wanting to offend anyone, it was John Wooden.
Thank you. What did I say? Did I say Woodman?
Woodman.
Thank you. Thank you. Yeah. So
Don't want
appreciate
anybody
that. Appreciate
listening to this and be like, nerds, what a bunch of nerds, they don't even know.
I got the harder name right, the Kareem Abdul-Jabbar, but yeah, John.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you.
No, but
Uh,
you're absolutely right. I mean, if we're not constantly brushing up on the fundamentals,
mm,
then we're going to get lost in the sauce as we get more advanced.
mm,
Because I
mm-hmm.
mean, a lot of the more sophisticated, more advanced, I mean, even software defined networking is rooted in the fundamentals. If you don't understand how the software functions atop the physical layer,
Yeah.
then you're going to be lost.
Yes. 100%. Currently, since you've been in this field for a while, what is your favorite productivity hack?
My favorite productivity hack. I don't know if you would call this a productivity hack, but I would say YouTube.
No? Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, I don't know. What are some of the answers that some folks have given you? I want to make sure that I'm answering it based on, what you have in mind here.
I mean, I've opened it up. I've sometimes asked, like, what's your favorite productivity tool? But I think hack kind of opens it up wider.
Yeah.
Which,
Okay.
I mean, YouTube it is a tool.
Yeah. So, okay, then in that case, Cisco has a feature, and I think more. I mean, it's across the industry, but I really am mostly familiar with Cisco. But Packet Tracer is a fantastic productivity hack, and it's basically like Wireshark, except that you're able to actually look and inspect what the packets contain.
Yeah.
Um, if I wanted to find out whether or not somebody was on Facebook half the day, I would be able to inspect some of these packets through a feature called Deep Packet Inspection. And I won't be able to look at what they're looking at per se.
Mm-hmm.
So, nobody's privacy is violated in that way, but I'm able to say like, oh, Brent Ingram has spent the last 3 hours on Facebook, you know?
Yeah. Yeah.
And, I don't just do that for the sake of doing that. We have triggers that tell us, basically like, hey, this is an issue, and it needs to be
Yeah.
investigated. But, a lot of times when, a packet isn't getting somewhere, let's say there's drop packets, this bit of data is supposed to go to this location. Packet Tracer is a really phenomenal tool to help me find out the origin, the destination, where it went, where it stopped, where it was supposed to go. It's a really, really helpful tool for network engineers. And, of course, Wireshark too is a fantastic tool. But then, yeah, going YouTube. YouTube tells me how to actually use those tools. YouTube is the hack for the hack.
Yes. YouTube University.
Amen.
For sure. It's helped so much.
Oh, yeah.
What's some advice you would give your younger self in regards to IT and networking?
Yeah. I would say take advantage of all of the trainings that were available to you that you thought were a waste of your time. And it wasn't even necessarily, let me walk that back. It wasn't that I thought that they were a waste of my time. I didn't think that they were relevant or that they applied because, I was a network engineer. This training is more so system administration on the server side. What does Christ have to do with Belial? What does a switch have to do with the server?
Yeah. Yeah.
It was basically, these two are unequally yoked. So, but now we live in the world of software-defined networking where,
Mm,
servers and virtual machines are doing the routing for us now.
mhm.
And that the routers and switches are really just, the roads that they take to get to where they want to be. And so I would say just take advantage of learning more about the entire spectrum of
Mm,
IT related, not IT related, just the entire spectrum of information technology. So learn
yeah,
about servers, learn about virtualization, learn Linux, right?
yeah,
Learn scripting, learn Python, learn all of the different languages that are out there because they're all so interconnected now.
yes,
It's not compartmentalized the way it used to be. It's all, there's separations of duty for sure, but
mm,
the reality is, developers are entering into, the network engineers are entering into the development world now, right?
yeah,
And it's crucial to know these things. You can get by, but if you want to grow and if you want to advance and you want to, specialize in certain areas, you have to know all of that stuff. So I would have said to myself, take advantage of these. We called them correspondence courses back in the day. I don't know what they call them now. I'm sure they're probably using like Pluralsight and stuff and all the stuff that's kind of like readily available to the commercial world. But back then it was um, correspondence courses that were kind of developed in house.
yeah,
I would have said, just take advantage of them, use them, even if you feel like they don't apply to you right now. There is coming a time is coming where it will apply, and you'll be
yeah.
glad that you have some familiarity with this stuff.
Nice. I love that. As we close out, I have just a few rapid fire questions. All right. What do you do to relax?
Relax. What is that?
Yeah.
I've recently started going to the gym again, and I know that that may not sound like it's relaxing, but in when you have three children. I'm also a bivocational pastor. So
Mhm,
there's ministry, and then of course there's work here at Wells Fargo. It's
mhm,
actually to go to the gym 3 times a week is leisurely for me. Also, I enjoy reading. You and I have connected over the fact that we love superhero movies, so
mhm.
that's a big one for me. Um, Movies, working out, reading, and things like this, man, just catching up with friends,
Yeah,
talking and just enjoying people.
love it. iOS or Android?
iOS, sorry.
Mac, Linux, or Windows?
If I had the bankroll, Mac, but right now I am living on Windows.
Okay. Coffee or tea?
Coffee, 100%.
You a night owl or a morning bird?
I would say more of a morning guy. I
Was that
used to
from the
be a night
army
owl.
or
Say again.
was that from the army? Being in the army or
Yeah, yeah. They turn you. You become both because you do
Mhm.
early mornings and late nights. But yeah, I'm in bed by like 9:30, like dozing off. So I'm usually up by like 6.
Awesome. Well, Nate, thank you so much for coming on the show and just sharing a bit of your story. And I think people will really take away some really great things from what you shared today. I appreciate you.
Absolutely. Can I say one more thing
Yeah, absolutely.
to the guys that are currently serving and they want to know where they should go from here? Everywhere, across almost every industry, there are two major efforts that are at the forefront of every major organization, and that's agile transformation. And agile is just a project management framework for rolling out new products and maintaining current products and the lifecycle management of those products. Get to know agile at the very least at the fundamental level, and cloud computing, right? I chose to go the Azure fundamentals route, and it was more than sufficient to teach me about what cloud computing is at the ground level. And then it helped me understand what Microsoft, one of the leading cloud providers, offers with regard to cloud computing. So if you want to get your foot in the door, learn Agile, learn cloud fundamentals, and then marry that with one of your current specialties, whether it's system administration, network engineering, software development, whatever it is, and you'll be a shoo-in.
Such good advice. Again, thank you so much. And yeah, that's where everything is heading towards, and they can't fill positions, fast enough with people who know those things. So that's really, really good advice.
Yeah, man. Thank you.
All
No
right,
problem.
thank you.
I don't know how to respond to that.